What would you do if your coworker's laziness wasn't just annoying, but was actively endangering people's lives? In today's story, my choice to stand up to that coworker and the boss who enabled her led to a mass resignation that brought an entire office to its knees. Our office had a team of 8 receptionists at a busy medical imaging center. We handled X-rays, CT scans, MRIs, and the like. 2 of us were full-time, and the rest, including me, were part-timers juggling school and work, with hours that stretched from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on some days, 7 days a week. We were a critical part of the operation. A crucial part of our job was scanning patient paperwork into the system on the same day it was received. This wasn't just bureaucratic red tape. It was vital for insurance and, more importantly, for timely diagnoses. Some of this paperwork held clues to things like brain tumors, and any delay could have catastrophic consequences for a patient. This brings me to my coworker. Let's call her Brenda. For reasons I'll never understand, Brenda simply refused to do her scanning. Instead, she would let the papers pile up and pass the entire stack off to whoever came in for the next shift. Her laziness wasn't just doubling our workload. It was dangerous. 5 of my coworkers and I had enough. We took Brenda aside privately and laid it out for her: start doing your job, or we're going to our boss. She promised she would. And for 2 glorious weeks, she actually did. Then, just as suddenly, she stopped, reverting to her old, lazy habits. So, 3 of us, the ones whose schedules aligned, went to our boss. We calmly explained how Brenda's refusal to work was doubling our stress and workload, and how it was fundamentally unfair to both us and the patients. Our boss listened, seemed concerned, and assured us the situation would be handled. We left her office feeling a sense of relief. This was the critical moment. The moment a good manager would have stepped in and solved a problem that was not only affecting morale but actively endangering patients. But our boss made a choice that day. A choice that would ultimately cost the company tens of thousands of dollars. Our workplace was already a bit like high school, full of gossip and passive-aggressive behavior, mostly among the 30 to 40-something women who acted like teenagers. People would be deliberately left out of lunch orders over some petty disagreement from that day. I'd managed to avoid the drama, but that ended the day we spoke to our boss. We had left her office door open, and the 3 busybodies in the billing department next door heard every single word. Naturally, one of them immediately called Brenda to tell her we had ratted her out. When Brenda was called into the boss's office later, she emerged looking absolutely furious. She marched straight to the administrative staff and painted a wild story of how the part-timers had a personal vendetta against her and that she was the real victim. From that day on, she made it her mission to make our lives a living hell. Brenda made a classic bully's mistake at that moment. She thought that by isolating us, she was winning. She was completely unaware that by pushing us away from the rest of the office, she was only pushing us closer together, forging the very alliance that would lead to her downfall. Her retaliation was childish and relentless. She encouraged other staff members not to speak to us. And while most didn't listen, a few people on the admin staff became noticeably colder. When working a shift with one of us, she'd take 30-minute bathroom breaks or completely vanish the moment a rush of patients came through the door. She refused to speak to us directly, even while sitting right next to us, instead sending passive-aggressive emails for things like, "Can you please stop swallowing your water so loudly?" We were suddenly uninvited from lunch orders. after-work happy hours, and dinner parties. She even took down our personal photos and mementos from the office walls and replaced them with pictures of her own kids. If anything, her antics brought the five of us who had complained closer. We started hanging out together, skipping the work happy hours we were no longer invited to anyway. But we were also careful. We documented everything. Nasty emails were forwarded to our personal accounts. We kept a running log of every long break she took and every time she disappeared during a rush. Then, Brenda somehow convinced the administrative staff to drastically cut our hours. My weekly hours were slashed from 20 to 10. The two others who had originally gone to the boss were in the same boat. Meanwhile, the coworkers who were frustrated but couldn't make that first meeting suddenly saw their hours double. Now, all of us were angry. When we asked why, the admin staff fed us a line of corporate nonsense about our work performance being monitored and the changes being approved by our boss. To add insult to injury, my yearly raise was denied, citing the same poor work performance. This time, all five of us went back to our boss. We came armed with our evidence, the email chains, the logs of her disappearing acts. Everything. We were ready to explain how toxic the environment had become. But before we could even present our case, she completely shut us down. She looked at us coldly and told us that we could either do our assigned work without complaint or we could find somewhere else to be employed. We were stunned. The 180-degree shift in her attitude made no sense. Until later that week, when I overheard her chatting with someone from billing. She mentioned how Brenda was coming over to her house that weekend to give her a free haircut. And there it was. This reveals the boss's greatest fatal flaw, her inability to separate professional responsibility from personal friendships. A weakness that blinded her to the toxicity spreading through her own office and ultimately sealed its fate. That night, my coworkers and I had a meeting. I was already planning to quit to start graduate school. Two others were heading back to nursing school. Another had found a full-time job. And the last one was just completely fed up. We formulated a plan. For the next week, we all acted as if nothing had happened. Then, the resignations began. One by one, we walked up to our boss's desk and handed in our letters. Each letter named the exact same final day of employment. The boss's expression shifted from confusion with the first letter, to irritation with the third, to a pale, dawning horror as the fifth envelope landed on her desk. As if on cue, a sixth receptionist, who was not part of our group but was tired of the drama, handed in her letter as well, announcing she was leaving for her MBA. In the span of a week, the office's receptionist staff dropped from 8 to 2. The two receptionists who were able to work past 5 p.m., they both quit. No more late-night appointments. I was the sole receptionist who worked on Sundays. No more being open 7 days a week. Our boss practically begged us to reconsider, to at least stagger our resignation dates to give her time. We all refused. It's a shame it had to come to that. As one person later commented online, quitting en masse is a great way to let bosses know they messed up. But why do they never listen before it reaches that point? By my conservative estimate, the office stood to lose at least $50,000 from the closed hours and days alone. Not to mention the cost of hiring and training 6 replacements. Instead of a farewell party, our last day was a scene of quiet panic as the administration scrambled. We didn't mind. We held our own celebration at a nearby restaurant with the few staff members we actually liked. I heard that in the months that followed, The administration finally saw Brenda's true colors now that she had no one else's work to hide behind. They cut her pay and her hours significantly. The office became a revolving door for new receptionists who rarely lasted more than a month in the toxic environment. And they never found people willing to work the late nights or weekends. But there was one final, satisfying piece of revenge. Remember how Brenda would do personal tasks at her desk? One day, I saw she was filling out forms for her children to receive free lunches at school. I also happened to see that on the form. She lied, claiming her husband was the sole provider to ensure their income fell below the eligibility threshold. She was stealing from a program designed for families who truly needed the help. A little while later, the vice principal of that school received an anonymous call. The caller let them know that a certain Brenda was, in fact, gainfully employed and was committing fraud. The caller was even so helpful as to provide Brenda's work address and her schedule. I know for a fact her kids were kicked off the program, because the vice principal called me back personally to confirm it. Ultimately, this whole disaster teaches a simple lesson: when you ignore your employees and protect a toxic individual, the entire structure can come crashing down. A manager's job is to manage. And when they fail, they shouldn't be surprised when their best people walk away. So, what do you think? Did I go too far with the final move against Brenda? Or was it a justified end to a toxic saga? Let me know in the comments.